What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the video. You know, history is very often consolidated, and on the one hand that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of things to go over and a finite amount of time. On the other hand, it's a real shame because there are so many amazing people and stories that inevitably fall through the cracks. That is why I'm starting this new series on my YouTube channel, Untold Heroes of History, and in honor of Pride Month, I'm going to be telling you about Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben. Let's go. Now, before we get into this, I want to let you guys know that there is no conclusive, substantiated evidence that von Steuben was in fact gay. There is a lot of evidence to suggest it, however, and given the time period, it's not all that surprising that there's no hard evidence of it. Hard. It's also the case that a lot of the time, especially today, representation can feel more like tokenism than anything. But in this case, it's pretty safe to say that if this man had not been, or at least had not been accused of being gay, we may not be living in the United States, at least not as we know it today. So without further ado, we're going to get right into it. Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben was born September 17, 1730 in Magdeburg, Prussia, which is in modern-day Germany. Prior to 1871, geography in Germany was pretty tricky unless you're a massive history nerd, because the concept of Germany as we know it today didn't exist back then. It was a just large confederation of smaller kingdoms that were all kind of looped into this idea of what it was to be German at the time. To make it simpler for everyone, Magdeburg is pretty much right between Hanover and Berlin. Yep, right there. Von Steuben joined the Prussian army at the age of 17 and served during the 7 Years' War. Friedrich was wounded twice and eventually made the rank of captain before a reduction in the Prussian army left him unemployed. Okay, remember a second ago how I said German geography was really complicated at the time? Well, since there was a reduction in the Prussian army, von Steuben had to find work elsewhere, and he would find it in Hohenzollern, Heckingen, Hohenzollern, Heckingen. Let's just say he found work with a neighbor. It was during this time that von Steuben was purported to have his alleged homosexual relationships. However, this wouldn't become a problem for him until after he returned from a trip to Paris, where he would meet a certain famous Yankee. Baron von Steuben, as he was being called now, had already been acquainted with the French Minister of War, Claude Louis. Louis knew Benjamin Franklin and introduced the two while they were all present together in Paris. The year was 1777, and the colonies were already locked in the war for independence against Great Britain and needed experienced military officers desperately. Franklin, however, was not able to offer the Baron much of anything. And by much of anything, I mean nothing. Von Steuben would have to go to America as a volunteer and kind of just hope for the best in terms of rank and pay. Understandably insulted, Friedrich scoffed at the offer and turned it down and returned to Prussia. Upon his return home, von Steuben was made aware of the rumors surrounding his homosexual activities. At this point in history, even an accusation of homosexual activity would have been more than enough to stymie his military career for the rest of his life. And that's pretty much the best alternative he could have hoped for. With his prospects in Europe looking bleaker and bleaker, Friedrich decided to try his luck with the new American army. Von Steuben arrived at Valley Forge in February of 1778, and his initial view of Washington's army was one of utter disbelief. The Baron got right to work whipping the men into shape. As Inspector General of the Continental Army, von Steuben's first order of business was taking care of the ghastly sanitation in the army camp. In the camp, there was no set arrangements of living quarters, the kitchen, or the latrines. Everyone pretty much did whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. The Baron immediately placed the kitchen and the latrines at opposite ends of the camp and enforced strict rules for sanitation. Von Steuben then trained an honor guard who would subsequently be used in demonstrating the training to the rest of the troops. He did this all while speaking very little English. Von Steuben wrote his entire training program down into a field manual, which was used by the United States Army until 1814, and some of the drills and tactics still being used as late as 1846. He wrote originally in German. His secretary, de Ponceau, one of his alleged lovers, would translate to French, and then Washington's aide would translate the French to English. They would do this every single night so the men could be trained the next day. Perhaps the most important contribution von Steuben brought to the Continental Army was bayonet training. Before his arrival, bayonets were used mostly by American soldiers as cooking skewers. After von Steuben's training of bayonet charges, they became a crucial part in American military strategy. In fact, colonial soldiers won the Battle of Stony Point using unloaded muskets in a bayonet charge solely because of von Steuben's training. And this feat would be repeated again and again through the rest of the war. After the war, Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben became a U.S. citizen in 1784 and was paid for his service after the war's end per his original agreement. He settled in New York with his longtime companion William North, who he met at Valley Forge. He even constructed a special room for him at his retreat in Manhattan. He was also present at George Washington's inauguration as the first president of the United States. When Friedrich von Steuben arrived in America, he brought with him his secretary, Peter Stephan de Pinceau, and at Valley Forge he began close relationships with the aforementioned William North and Benjamin Walker, both of whom were young military officers at the time. Von Steuben would eventually adopt the latter two and make them his heirs. Now, one thing we have to understand is that adoption was not at all uncommon historically for homosexual couples, particularly if there was a wide age difference between the two. Unfortunately, it was pretty much the only legal guarantee that someone could bequeath their estate, their wealth, their inheritance, what have you, to their partner in the event of their death. Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben died on November 28, 1794, in what would become Steuben, New York. There are several other towns and counties named after him, and many cities have annual parades in his honor. To say that I've only scratched the surface of von Steuben's contributions to the United States is an understatement if ever there was one. I have covered a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the things that he has done to contribute to the country that it is today. Literally, without this man, I would venture to guess that we probably would not have won the Revolutionary War. It was because of his training and instilling of discipline in the Continental Army that they were able to win battles after the winter of 1778. This is indisputable. If you'd like to learn more about von Steuben, he was featured in an episode of America, the Story of Us, and I have put a link to that episode in the description. And don't worry, the link is the History Channel's official YouTube page. As I've stated before in another video, History has begun uploading a ton of their old series onto the YouTube channel for absolutely free, so I highly recommend you check them out. You can also do more reading via the internet, your local library, or bookstore. Heck, you can even buy the manual written by von Steuben at Valley Forge on Amazon. Well, everybody, that wraps it up for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to doing more videos like this and just telling you more and more about cool historical figures. But in the meantime, if you would like more content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on that notification bell so you get notified of all my new videos, all my new series. Also, be sure to check out the Average Intelligence podcast. There is a playlist of all the episodes we've done so far on the Arete Media channel page. And we will see you on the next video.